Oh, listen to that.
Yeah, yeah.
You like that? Right? That was really cool. Oh.
About libraries.
Good, I need a bookmark.
Which will be fun. That's all I could imagine.
I have no idea.
I have to get off my,
And, you know, as I talk to people, nobody has this report.
Really?
Have you ever been to the little air museum in Santa Maria?
I've driven by it. I know what it is.
You ought to go in.
Yeah.
It's a hoot.
I want to.
It is just a hoot. It is
Hey,
so
you guys are having too much fun out there. Let's cancel this meeting.
Oh, yeah. Don Carlino.
Want to call to order the regular meeting of the Solvang City Council for Monday, June 27th, 2016. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Deuce,
Present.
Jameson,
Here.
Skit,
Present.
Zimmerman,
Present.
Mayor Richardson.
Here. Mr. Zimmerman, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Place your hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Manager's report.
Just two things to mention. One, remind everyone that the 4th of July parade will be Monday at 11 o'clock, so be ready for a detour in town. And then second, the Maple Avenue extension is now open. So we now have a connection between Pine and Alisal Road, so for the traveling public.
That's good news. That's it? Okay, next is public communications, written or verbal. At this time, please direct comments to the City Council regarding consent calendar items or matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the Council. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. I have several speaker slips. We'll start with Fred Koval, followed by Gay Infantati.
We'll get that one.
Close? Fred? Oh, okay, well, then Gay, would you come up, please?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. I'm Gay Infante, resident of Solvang. My husband Mark and I attended last week's ID1 meeting, and we left with several concerns that we wanted to bring to your attention. At this meeting, the ID1 board voted to request approval for the reinstatement of a tax assessment levy amounting to $75,000 to cover ID1's 2016-17 budget shortfall, $750,000, thank you. Which would be applied to parcels based on their assessed land value. If this assessment is approved, it's our understanding that Solvang residents will pay 36% of it, although Solvang uses less than 1% of the water that ID1 delivers to customers. This vote, as well as the discussion leading up to it, was done in the absence of both of the ID1 board members that represent the city of Solvang. Public comment given to the board, which requested that Solvang be exempted from this tax levy, was dismissed. The rejoinder of the District 1 trustee who represents Los Olivos was that ID1's cost for this water is, that the water was available to ID1 if the city wanted it. However, we all know that ID1's cost for this water is the most expensive of all sources available to our city. In addition, much was made among the board members about an incident in which ID1 had to shut down their Zone 2 reservoir because Solvang was draining it during a peak usage period. This raises concerns as to whether ID1 can and will provide water to Solvang in a peak period emergency situation. Another argument made that Solvang was obligated to pay for ID1's infrastructure was countered in public comment to the effect that Solvang already paid its high rate for ID1's water due to the fact that this infrastructure was built into the rate, its infrastructure cost. So our first question in regard to this issue is, if this assessment is approved, will Solvang residents be paying twice for applicable infrastructure costs for any water purchased from ID1? in addition to paying for more infrastructure via the special assessment than Solvang's fair share based on usage. Second question, can the City Council initiate any sort of appeal to the assessment or make an argument directly to the approval authority to exempt Solvang from the assessment? And third, should the City of Solvang be looking at the cost of constructing its own infrastructure to receive and store state water in order to sever ties with ID1? There was also discussion at this meeting of the chromium-6 treatment that will be required on ID1's water from its upland wells. ID1 is seeking a loan from the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development Program and estimates the cost of the project at $12 million currently, which eventually all ID1 customers will have to repay with interest. Clearly, it will be ID1's intent that the City of Solvang pay for this as well. Next, the at-large trustee asked whether the agricultural users within ID1, who use approximately 50% of the water, will be free to drill their own wells, and he was told yes. The concern there was that the revenues to ID1 would go down even further. No mention was made of possibly restricting drilling permits for new wells that would compete with ID1 and other users who draw from the same aquifer. Neither were any suggestions made by the board concerning measures that the agricultural users can and should use to conserve water. Indeed, it was clear that ID1 believes that any restrictions based on agricultural users, including raising their very low water rates, would drive them out of the San Ynez Valley and hence ruin the valley's rural character. However, unless the users want to leave the state, I doubt that they would find cheap, abundant water available anywhere else these days. Also interesting to us, although relevant to the discussions, was that there was no discussion of the Groundwater Sustainability Act, the pending formation of the San Ynez Valley Groundwater Agency, or the issue of how the groundwater will be allocated among all parties, including ID1, independent well owners, and the City of Solvang in the future, even though it was stated several times that ID1 relies almost entirely on groundwater to meet its requirements. Our impression was that ID1's management is extremely short-sighted. All discussions were focused only on ID1's near-term situation. There's no obvious long-term planning going on. And I think I'm running out of time. Mark will finish this up. Our impression was, sorry, I lost my place. In fact, in view of ID1's falling revenues due to conservation, fears of potential receivership and subsequent takeover by the state were mentioned, but it seemed clear that ID1 believes that Solvang's so-called deep pockets can be relied upon substantially to prevent this happening. To quote one trustee, Solvang has $19 million in revenues, which we don't. Huh? In reserves. In reserves, excuse me. Okay. You gonna call on Mark next? Okay. Wonderful.
Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. Mark Infantes, Solvang's resident. Sorry. There were several things about this meeting that we sat through that were very interesting. And we realize there's a lot of issues between Solvang and ID1 that require resolution, and my wife and I are not experts on this, but we wanted to bring this to your attention. But it was clear in the meeting that ID1's rationale and decision-making heavily relied on past history that predates Solvang as a city, predates the construction of Bradbury Dam and Lake Cachuma. ID1 needs to be a little bit more forward-thinking and should not be allowed to ignore the many subsequent changes that they should consider, including, of course, the growth of San Ynez Valley, the long-term drought, the climate change, all of which contribute to the increased water scarcity, as well as the new state water regulations. All of this in order to adequately address and resolve their issues. They were complaining that because everybody's conserving, they don't have the revenue coming in. And there was an issue there. So we'd like to encourage the council to consider the issues and the questions we've raised this evening. In addition, to work with ID1 to resolve them equitably. And in a view of the vote taken at that meeting, please work with the work to ensure that the Solvang residents are adequately represented in all the venues and the future cost of our water supply is determined. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Fred Koval?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members, Fred Koval, Solvang. I too attended the meeting along with the mayor, ID1's meeting last week. And I did say something there that I think bears repeating. And that's the cumulative effect of what's going to happen to our valley, the affordability of this valley. The straw for me that broke the camel's back was the article in the paper about the 14.7 million bond that the high school wants to do. They seem to want to do it every 5 years about. It's all the leaking pipes, crying towel special. And they want to do it on a 15-year term, 2 bonds, and that's going to save 72% for bond costs. Of course, they never tell you that with a 15-year, the premium is double a 30-year, although it's a shorter period of time. Hence, our assessment will be double of what it was the last time. We still have the Solvang Elementary bond we're still paying on. Okay, then I start looking at, of course, I went through the litany of water. I pay 4 water bills. Now I'm going to, with the parcel tax that's coming along from ID1, and their 5% increase in rates. And then Solvang has on the agenda their new study for more water rate and sewer rate increases. Then we have, yes, as the Infantes talked about, the Groundwater Sustainability Act. So I asked them, what's the cost? Asked Bruce Willis, what's the cost? No idea. The litigation costs will be huge. And we haven't even programmed that in. Where's the risk analysis that this city should have from all of these? What's the effective cost on the resident for this? You look at the Chumash Valley buyout. What's their impact going to be? The small water systems, what are they going to do up, such as Woodstock, the Chromium 6 issues? What effect is that going to be when somebody else has to take that on? And what will be the indirect effect to us? Litigations. You know, you read the Newshawk. What do they talk about? Santa Barbara Newshawk. What do they talk about? They're now saying, hey, the dead pool belongs to us. We're going to use it. We're going to raise this health and safety flag, and we're going to take it. Never mind, well, what are the downstream pumpers? What's going to be the effect on them? So who's going to rule there? I see nothing from this city council, from the dais. What does that mean to us? What does that mean if we have no wells running? Well, you're going to just say, well, we don't need those wells. We can get along without them. What about all your neighbors? Well, they can fend for themselves. Nobody's gotten together and talked about this, the effect on the valley. When they take the water, and they will the end of the year, that's why that barge is being moved over there next week, actually this week. And so the litigations, what about the master contract in 1995 with Lake Kachuma that ID1 has and the other guys? No, in that contract there is no biological opinion for the fish. And the water flow has not changed. What does that mean? What does it mean when ID1 got out of comb here, just divorced themselves? What is that going to mean? Where's that going to go? What's that vacuum effect going to be on this city? The 5 CFS that has been given up? Okay, we've given it up to a lower number. You can be darn sure the South Coasters are going to take every bit of that water. It'll be lost forever. State water, what a joke, the delivery for state water. What's that effect going to be as it dries up this summer and we go back to 5% delivery? We've got to start thinking about the global issue here, not just our own little fiefdom.
Thank you, Fred. That's all the speaker slips I have right now. Does anyone else wish to speak that hasn't turned in a speaker slip? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for council comments and requests. Would you like to start, Mr. Zimmerman?
I have no comment.
Mr. Skit?
Comments that I'm going to make to the Infantes. I think you had a good learning experience going to the meeting to see what the city of Solvang has been trying to deal with over the last number of years. And it's probably very interesting in regards to comments from Mr. Koval. If someone wants to see something that's real scary, go up and go to the vista point that overlooks the dam at Point Kachuma. And it is very scary. They're down to 14%. If anybody was watching the Channel 12 news yesterday, they had a, I think it was both yesterday and on Channel 3 on Saturday night, they had a story on Kachuma, and they're talking about that there will be a release sometime in the end of, or middle part, or the end of July, which will let out about 7,000 to 8,000 acre feet, and the lake will drop another 8 to 10 feet. It's down to about 90, actually it's 89 and a half feet down from full right now. So if it goes down another 8 to 10 feet, it's going to be basically 100 feet down, and it's going to be about, instead of about 14%, it's probably going to be less than, probably in the neighborhood of, actually it will be less than 10%. It'll be about 8% by the time they finish on that one there. So it's going to be interesting. The water is, as I said, Mr. Cole said, it is something that is a global institution in California, and it's it will definitely be interesting to see what happens. State water is not very reliable, and we could go to another 5% year depending on what happens in Northern California, and it is going to be nasty out there, and so keep conserving water. And unfortunately, when you conserve water, usage goes down, but we still have fixed costs that we have to meet. So you will be seeing some rate increases, probably. I won't say you will for sure, but I wouldn't bet against it. And part of our institution we have to do is, which is required by state law, is to do a survey every so often on our rates of our water and our sewer due to, I can't remember what proposition is, but it's one of those things that we have to do it every so often to make sure that we are not making unreasonable increases on our customers. But it's going to be, until we get some real heavy rains and get Kachuma full, the lakes up in Northern California full, lakes all over in California get our aquifers back up. Unfortunately, our groundwater aquifers take years to replenish, but hopefully we will see wet weather. It comes again. And I don't know if anybody takes a look at the history, but back in the 1870s, they had a drought that was equal to what we have right now. Unfortunately, in 1870, there were only several million people in the state of California versus now where we're pushing 33 or 34 million people. So it's, we have X amount of water and 10 times X amount of people going for that same water. So it's going to be, the next couple of years are going to be real tight for our water supply for everybody.
Mr. Deuce.
Thank you. Just wanted to comment on something you said, Mark. And first of all, I just want to ask you, just to make sure I heard you right, that ID1, was, they were saying something about ID1 predating the city.
They were talking about the history of how everything was established, and a lot of that history predated this Solvang becoming a city. Not its incorporation in 1911, but it's becoming a city in 85.
Okay, all right. Yes, a lot of things happened before Solvang became a city. However, before Solvang was a city, it was a municipal district. Primary purpose was serving was water and sewage, and the fire department, among a few other things, and that predates ID1 by a significant amount of years. ID1 came along in about 58, 59. Solvang the district, SMID, Solvang Municipal Improvement District, was about 50 or 51, I believe. So, this was the city's immediate predecessor. Yes, yeah, well, I don't want to go into the whole story, but there was no way in 1958, 59 that ID1 could have floated a bond. There was not enough real valuation in San Ynez, Los Olivos, and Ballard. Solvang had to come in on it, or they wouldn't have the valuation to float that bond. So, anyway, just a quick little history lesson on that one. No comment otherwise.
Mrs. Jameson?
Well, I just would like to, this is going to be maybe corny, but I'd like to thank all the people that helped fight that fire. That was a pretty amazing event. And I have an office that happened to look right over that huge plume of smoke. And it was, now Infantes probably saw it from their house too, it was an unbelievable sight, watching that thing grow and change. And then it got blown all over the place, so it wasn't so spectacular when the winds came up. But we were fortunate that we had Team 4 here. There are 6 of these teams in the United States, and Team 4 happened to be led by Rocky, and Rocky used to be a firefighter in Santa Barbara County, so he knew the county. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was dealing with. And I figured out that I was probably 11 years old when that area burned the last time, and I think it burned like over 80,000 acres. And 85,000 acres at that time. It was a huge fire, and I remember the whole county was just covered with smoke. On another note, the band Territorial Law, the Agan brothers, they lost one of their brothers, Dick Agan. And he was the percussionist, drummer, right? And one heck of a guy. And that, I feel badly for the family, and I offer them my condolences. That's all.
I want to thank the people of Solvang for their patience regarding the resurfacing of Mission. That was totally out of the city's hands. That belonged to the state. The road belongs to the state, and the state decided they needed to do it. They argued that they would rather shut down the road for one day than have congestion for 3 or 4 days, although they did have congestion for 3 or 4 days. So,
Didn't work.
and regarding ID1, I did a little research on my own, and in 2010, which was the last year that ID1 had ad valorem taxes on our property tax bill, I paid $168. It was that year that, well, let me start with that the average production for ID1's water is roughly 5,500 acre feet a year. And that year, Solvang pulled out 79 acre feet, which was less than 0.1% of the production of ID1. Based on that number, the entire city of Solvang should have only paid $105 for the use of the impact on their plumbing, and I alone paid $168. But it's a serious thing. that your water bills are going up, only they're gonna be hidden in your property tax. And it will be paying 36% of the infrastructure costs that ID1 is shy. We have no control over how they spend their money, how they use their money for all the legal expenses they have in particular. And they are between a rock and a hard place when it comes to the chromium-6 problem. And I fear that we're going to be stuck with 36% of that. And we use less than 1/10 of the water. We're hoping that something could be done about that. That vote was taken with 3 members of their 5-member board present. The 2 members that were the district representative for Solvang were not there. So we had no impact on the decision. So I want you to be aware of it and hope that if there's something comes about it, we can get support to encourage ID1 to support us in one way or another, either by changing the ratio of the 36% or eliminating Solvang altogether. I had one other thought and it slipped my mind. Oh, the interesting thing is that in their discussions about the infrastructure impact Solvang has on them, they decided that they had to increase our water rates by 60% over their domestic water rates, which and they argue, well, that covered our impact on their system, and here they're going to turn around and get 36% out of us. I think I've said enough on that subject. It's one that rankles me.
Everybody.
And I hope you're all aware of it, that you'll see it on your tax bill. Item 3 is correspondence received by the council. We did have none. The approval of the agenda as presented, I'm suggesting that we move item number 9, the budget discussion, to the top of the list before item 7. Is that agreeable? Okay. And then on the council minutes of June the 13th, are any corrections, deletions to those? And if not, can I have a motion accepting?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Passed. On to the consent agenda. Does anybody wish to pull any of the consent items? Seeing none, then may I have a motion accepting the consent agenda?
Mayor,
Moved.
I just have a point of order here. We have people sitting out there who do not have agendas. They have no idea what we are voting on the consent agenda. And I think it should be read. I think it's protocol.
All right, okay. Would you read the consent agenda, please?
Agenda item 5A, receive and file Sheriff's Department report for May 2016. 5B, amendment number 9 to professional services agreement for computer support services. Item 5C, renewal of conveyance license for use of city streets for Segway tours. 5D, amendment to contract of employment for Brad Vidro, city manager, and potential 4% increase in pay. 5E, memorandum of understanding between Teamsters Union Local 986 and the City of Solvang, effective July 1, 2016 through June 30th, 2017.
Okay.
Thank you.
I picked up that habit of just going ahead with the consent agenda. Various other boards within the county do that. They just report what agenda items are pulled. And the way that our public comment period is that we expect the public to read the consent agenda so they can comment on before the consent calendar comes forward. So anyhow, can I have a motion accepting the consent calendar?
I think you had one.
So moved.
You did it already.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Would you call the roll, please? I'm sorry about that. I lost track.
He didn't have he didn't have his nap today.
Deuce. And Eddie seconded. The
I
first
ma- I
time.
made
First
I
time?
made the original
Oh, the
motion.
first time? Okay.
So
I didn't do anything.
Okay.
we need a second.
I'll second it.
Yes.
I seconded it.
Okay.
I missed my nap today too.
Councilmember Skitt,
Yes.
Jameson,
Yes.
Deuce,
Yes.
Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson?
Yes, that passed with a 5-0. On to the regular agenda.
Could I just make
Sure.
Could I just make an announcement for Dale? We're not on. Okay, thank you.
Are we going to have Carla here fairly shortly?
On to item 9.
Item 9, resolution of the City Council of the City of Solvang adopting a budget for fiscal year 2016-17.
Staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. Sandra Featherson, your Director of Administrative Services. Tonight, I'm back with the final budget for fiscal year 2016-17. We made some changes from the preliminary budget and the hearing based on conversations with the council and the discussions that we had that night, as well as some other issues that have come up recently. So I'm going to highlight the changes that we've made, and they're also in the staff report. So these are changes that were originally in the prelim budget, and they're now going to be in the final budget. Or changes from the prelim that will now be in the final. With the agencies, the council elected to contribute an additional $20,000 to the SCBB, so their allocation is now going to be $720,000. We've added a $30,000 expense for professional services for a compensation study to review staff salaries. We originally had identified an amount of about $61,000 to carry forward into the new year for the Vets Hall lead abatement and painting and window replacement project, but based on the work they've done so far, we think we only need to carry forward about $40,000. In the water fund, we're now going to carry forward $54,000 to finish up the meter replacement project. We've increased the anticipated expenses in the upland well project by about $85,000 to finish up the HCA South well. And in the transit fund, there was $30,000 in revenue budgeted from PT Missy. That's the Prop 1B funding. But there was a project that was supposed to be in there along with that. So it's a $30,000 project that's going to be to upgrade the parking lot. And so that's now been incorporated into the budget. A couple other late ads, I apologize, they're not in the staff report. But we're anticipating about, and these are projects that will be carried forward that were expected to be spent in the 15-16 year, but because of some other issues, they're now going to be done in 16-17. So this isn't really new expenditures. These are projects that were already anticipated. One is a roof replacement at HCA Park for $7,100, and another one is a slurry seal as part of a Measure A project. So a majority of that funding is coming out of Measure A, and we'll update that budget for the actual final printed document. But for the general fund, that's going to be an additional $4,000. So in the table, you'll see there the general fund, we were anticipating that deficit to be the $638,143. And with a couple of these changes that I just mentioned, the HCA roof and the slurry seal, it's now going to be a deficit of $649,243. So a net change of about $1,100. I'm sorry, $11,000. And the reason we're in that deficit, just as a reminder, is because we're spending the $810,000 from reserves on the Table A water. The rest of the staff report really contains items that we had already covered in the prior meeting, and you'll see there's a table in there with the grant funding that was approved at the prior meeting. The amounts are in there. The only amount that changed really from the proposed amount, there were two. One is the library. The subcommittee had proposed the $88,000 at the last meeting. It was approved for $100,000. And the other one was the animal rescue team, proposed by the subcommittee was $7,500 and approved at the last meeting was $3,750. And then the SCVB, like I already mentioned. Other than that, all the other items are pretty much staying the same. And that really concludes my report. I'm available if you have any questions.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
Just a question, not so much with the staff report, but do you know where we have a $19 million reserve that's the ID1? Do we have something someplace we don't know about?
Well,
An account in a Swiss bank someplace?
No, but what they may have been looking at is the excess cash that we have available in LAIF. So combined with the general fund and all our other funds, the enterprise funds, Measure A, all of the excess cash we have in LAIF. Doesn't mean it's available for use, but, you know, as we're needing it, that's where it is, and it is about $19 million.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, well then we'll go to the public for comment. We'll start with Tori Babcock, followed by Jeannie Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor Richardson and members of the council. My name is Tori Babcock, and I live in Solvang. I've been an English teacher for 35 years. 25 of the last 25 years have been spent at San Ynez High School. I come to speak to you tonight as an educator and resident, asking you to please fully fund the position of full-time librarian at Solvang Library. San Ynez High School has been without a credentialed librarian for several years now, and it is my understanding that there are no longer librarians in any of our grade schools. As such, Solvang Library provides a much-needed resource for our students, particularly those residing in Solvang, Los Olivos, and San Ynez. As outgoing chair of the English department at the high school, I can tell you that having a full-time librarian will make an appreciable difference in helping to build and execute our supplementary reading programs that we have on 9th through 12th grade levels, where so many of our students, both disadvantaged and otherwise, seek outside reading books that we encourage them to read to promote literacy and critical thinking. You know, our resources are finite as well at San Ynez High School with our library, and we really rely on Solvang Library. Additionally, a fully funded librarian will be better able to promote the student-centered writing contests that are sponsored by the county library system and other cultural events such as the debates and discussions where our students learn the importance of public dialogue and discourse. Our library is a key part of intellectual life here in Solvang, for it provides the necessary resources for children, for students, and for many adults of all ages to come together and learn not only to talk about books, but to love them as well. As such, I implore you to please fund the full-time position of Solvang librarian. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. Jeannie Johnston.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council people. Thank you, Ms. Babcock. You've shortened my speech. Yes. I am a fairly new board member of the Friends of the Library, and I'm the former branch supervisor of your branch library here in Solvang. Tori made the presentation about how important libraries are. I know you've heard it before. Guess what? I'm not going to do that. To me, it's self-evident, and I think it must be to you as well. So all I am doing is asking for and thanking you for whatever financial support you can give to the library. And those concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Tracy Farhad.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City staff, audience. Tracy Farhad, Executive Director of the Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau, and with me is my President of the Board of Directors, Mr. Jeff Paskey of Solvang Restaurant, and the shy gentlemen in the back are also part of my Board of Directors, and we have Mr. David Rasmussen of Rasmussen's Gifts and Kim Jensen of Ingeborg's Chocolates, and our honorary board economist, Dr. Ken Harwood. So together, we just wanted to say thank you very much for your vote of confidence in us. We really appreciate your reinvestment in tourism, your #1 industry, year after year. It's working. We're going to work hard for you, and we're going to keep it going. And we look forward to bringing all the good news back from China, as well as from every other trade show, every other media, every other tour operator that we're able to host. But I especially wanted to thank all the businesses that are in Solvang, because even though you honor us with the job of getting the different jobs done, we can't do it without the businesses in this town. So thank you to everyone, because they continue with both the volunteers on this board, but the businesses who step forward time and time again to offer up what can we do, how can we help. We know how important it is. So thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You guys do a great job. What can we say? I have no other speaker slip. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion and action. Who would like to start? Mr. Skid.
Thank you. Just a question for staff in the first place here. Did we ever get any response from the animal rescue since our last meeting?
We did not.
Okay. In that case there, I would like to take the $37.50 away from animal rescue, since we've never really heard from them, and I'd like to transfer that additional funding to the Solvang Library. That's my comments.
Is that a motion?
Okay, that'll be a motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I can second that.
Okay, will you call the roll, please? It's been moved and seconded.
Councilmember Skid,
Yes?
Deuce,
Yes.
Jamison,
Yes.
Zimmerman,
Of course not. No.
Mayor Richardson.
No. That motion passed with a 3-2. Strike the contribution to the animal rescue team. And did you say put it where?
To the library.
To the library. Whoa,
Mr. Mayor, could I comment further?
sure.
We have set procedures, we've set requirements for funding. And that included a mandatory attendance and a complete application, and that includes any further information that the council requires. There had been inquiries put out for I believe 3 or 4 different groups on this list, all but animal rescue responded with further information. I feel if we don't stick by our rules of mandatory attendance, if we don't stand by our rules of completed application on these grants, why should we expect anybody, any of the others, to stick by the rules? There have been a few people from these grants that have asked me, why did we fund at all? I have to agree. If we're going to have requirements, we're going to have rules. We're going to have to live with them. And that is my reason for seconding. And if Mr. Skid hadn't made the motion, I would have. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have one comment. Then why did we cut back on all the others that requested funding? Why not provide the funding for the community if they request it? Why are we cutting back altogether?
What?
My question is what's the point if we are generating the income from the tax revenue? Why are we going through and nickel and diming all the community organizations? We can eliminate that one, okay, fine, but what about the others? Why are we taking off money from them?
You know, I don't believe we took money away. We went with we upped some, and we went with the proposed on the rest of them. I don't see where we took anything away from what was proposed to us at the last meeting. I'm just looking down at the figures right now, and I don't see where we took away from anybody off the proposed grants.
Well, we did. People helping people.
People helping people, veggie rescue.
Okay, we went with the proposed, what you guys said. So we went, with 2 exceptions, we went with what the Budget Committee had recommended.
Any other comments? We still have a budget to approve. There's no other comments. Can I have a motion approving the budget? Staff, making the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Skit,
Yes.
Jameson,
Yes.
Yes.
Zimmerman,
No.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes. That passed with a 4-1. On to item 7.
Item 7, first reading of proposed amendment to Title 4, Chapter 10, amending regulations for massage establishments.
Staff report?
Thank you, Mayor. As noted previously, the council did amend the municipal code last year to reflect changes that were made in state law relative to regulation of massage therapy, licensing, and certificates. And what we did essentially was the state had originally given cities the authority to regulate them. They had taken it away. It has now been granted back. And at the time when we drafted the ordinance, the new agency which is issuing certificates to massage therapists, the details were not real clear and the website wasn't developed, and we did not realize until we talked with some of our massage therapist providers that in order to get a California Association of Massage Therapy certificate, massage therapists need to have 500 hours of education. There are several in our community who have been massage therapists practicing for quite some time and do not meet that educational requirement. And we understand that it would be both a financial burden as well as a logistical burden for those folks to get that. So what we're proposing tonight is that you consider language which would allow the city manager, after meeting and reviewing massage therapist experience and education, would give him the authority to waive the requirement for the massage therapist. We're essentially asking that he be given the authority to grandfather in folks that are already practicing and qualified. So that's what we are bringing before you tonight. I do know there are some of the massage therapists who are in this position here present tonight who may wish to speak. And that concludes my staff report, and I'm available for questions.
Are there any questions of staff report?
Yes, I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. When you say have experience, are you just speaking about here in Solvang, or people that are coming in that want to be qualified by the city manager?
It would be both. The way we had phrased it is that folks could make an appointment with the city manager and any staff member he deemed would be appropriate, present their education credentials, their experience, and how long they've been practicing, and that if it appears any other licensing they may have, and if that combination of experience and education is something that deems them to be qualified, that he could waive the requirement for the certificate.
So
This
we're
would
not
be-
talking about just grandfathering in those who are already here?
If they can't qualify to get the state certificate, they could come and present their credentials to the city manager. But it's not a blanket grandfather of everybody who's currently licensed. If folks meet the educational requirement and could get the California certificate, they would need to do so.
Any other questions? My question is that can we grandfather in the current business license holders, massage parlors, and any new business license requests that have the 250 hours? Can we not allow that or require the 500 hours?
I'm looking at our city attorney to see if we could differentiate between those that already hold business certificates and those who don't. Because we have interested parties in both situations.
Yeah, that would be problematical, just based upon, equal protection. It would be easy to say certificate is a requirement, but once you're going to grant an exception, people have the right to travel and move around, and the exception should apply equally to people if we're going to allow that.
We couldn't change the ordinance to say that current business license holders are grandfathered to 250 hours, and any new business applications would require the 500-hour license?
I'm just saying, I think that would be problematical.
You're saying it's iffy. All right. Any questions of the staff? Then we need to go to the public for comment. Is there anybody? I have no speaker slips. Is there anybody in the public wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for action. Any discussion? I guess there's no discussion. Then can I have a motion?
Okay, I will move that we go with staff recommendation and introduce for first reading by title of only of the amendments, Title 14, Chapter 10, Massage Therapy Regulations.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Deuce,
Yes?
Skit,
Yes.
Jameson,
Yes.
Zimmerman,
No.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes. It's a 4-1. On to item 8.
Actually, I don't know that you included the accept the exemption, item C on there? Okay.
As a staff recommendation.
Item 8, resolution of the City Council of the City of Solvang adopting revised usage and rental fees for the Veterans Memorial Building.
Staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Fred Logman with Solvang Parks and Recreation. Tonight, I bring before you a recommendation to raise the proposed rate schedule fee hike for the Veterans Memorial Hall. The last time we did this was 8 years ago in 2008. And we recently completed another review in which we compared rates to similar facilities in the surrounding communities. They were conducted with all 3 tiers of renters in mind. That is nonprofits, locals, and out-of-area residents. Our current system has 3 time frames, 0 to 3 hour, 3 to 6 hour, and 6+ hour, which is probably the most commonly used in all-day facility. All the facilities that we compared rates to has only 1 or 2 time frames, with at least 3 of them allowing for a full day price only. And so one of the recommendations is that our current application be updated to just 2 time frames, which would be the 2 time frames of 0 to 6 hours and 6+ hours, or an all-day event. We have also simplified the rate structure to be more understandable, and each room's rate of the Veterans Hall was raised individually. Combination rental rates, if you're renting 2 or more rooms, have also changed and are lower, kind of a bulk discount. And although the rates proposed are in some cases significantly higher than the current rates, still when comparing to other facilities, we're less about 75% of the time. And for example, the Solvang Veterans Memorial Hall, the total facility currently for a local rental is $815, where the Santa Maria Veterans Hall comes in over $1,800, the San Luis Obispo Veterans Hall in at $1,400, and the Veterans Hall in Lompoc at $1,000. So you can see we're significantly less. Generally across the board in our study, we found we're less than other agencies, between $180 up to more than $1,400. The current budget that we are in now, fiscal year 2015-2016, we have about $92,960 in expenses, which includes the recreation clerk's position salary, and she handles all Veterans Hall rentals. There are several other costs, including supplies, small equipment, repair and maintenance, utilities, water and sewer, plus insurance, and that equals the near $93,000. In addition to that, we have several maintenance staff, which equals about $52,000 in labor annually. And within the Parks and Recreation Department, between the director's time and parks maintenance, nearly $9,000. So our total expenses to run the Veterans Hall is $153,000 plus. The revenue we bring in annually is $32,000, so we're operating at a loss at $121,000. There are several groups that get the facility currently at no cost. Those include the City of Solvang, Santa Barbara County Sheriff, the Solvang Library, United Blood Bank, the San Ynez Valley Youth Recreation, Taste of Solvang, and per an adopted City Council policy, city employees are also allowed to use the facility up to 2 times per year. as well as the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the American Legion-related events. We also have several capital improvement needs. One was mentioned earlier, but in 2007, we had, at a cost of $289,000, a new roof was installed, and currently the lead abatement and window project at the facility is running approximately $162,000. In addition, there needs to be some electrical upgrades and restroom improvements in the future. There are no recommended changes within the security fees or deposits, and it is also recommended that the fees increase annually on the CPI index. And that concludes my staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Are there any questions of staff report?
No question, but I will make a comment in regards to the maintenance. I know last week I noticed a leak in one of the irrigation boxes and
you saw that's been fixed?
And I saw that, I don't know if it's been fixed, but there's a hole in the ground and a pile of dirt where the irrigation.
Waiting for it to dry. I'm going to fill it tomorrow after we double check
But
it.
good to see once it was reported, your staff did check on it and took prompt action on it. And I also want to make a comment that the new windows that are going in look very good in the building, and you be hard pressed that they weren't the original type of windows in there. So it's looking good, and I think it will be a great improvement when they get all in and
I've
finished.
passed that last compliment on to Matt.
Any other questions?
I'm just curious why commercial use compared to some of the other categories was not quite as high percentage-wise in the increase.
Commercial and outer area are the one and the same.
Right. So.
So you mean overall, why wasn't it as
right,
such?
Right. Because they make money using the building, supposedly.
Yeah, the commercial's a rare exception. Most of the out-of-area use is based on weddings, quinceañeras, parties. There's not so much typical commercial use as in the vendors coming in and using it.
Is there any of that?
I couldn't tell you offhand how many were there in the last year. Yeah, the tool company hasn't been there in quite a while, the tool show.
Yeah.
It's small.
Okay, thank you.
In the event of like another tour of California, what would they fall under? Would they fall under a commercial or an out-of-town?
No, they'd probably fall under it coming to the city council or city manager electing to give it to them for free.
Ah.
Not as a bad way, but I mean, that's a promote solving thing, so.
Similar projects
Yes.
like that, you know. Any other comments? We have no speaker slips. Is there anybody in the audience that wish to comment on this particular item? Raising the rates of the Veterans Hall. Ms. Farhad?
I just wanted to applaud the opportunity to raise the rates for the Veterans Hall. I think there's plenty of room for it. I think the commercial business we can help try to increase. And I think that is a good idea for making the difference. And just wanted to applaud Fred and work for making that happen. I think it's quite doable on a visitor standpoint, and look forward to helping you fill that midweek space and getting you some more money.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for action.
Just a question. Question for Fred.
I'm sorry?
Fred.
Oh.
So, I mean, this might be kind of a finance thing too, but what would it look like to try and at least break even? So we're showing a net loss, right? Is that what we're saying, 120 net loss?
Correct.
So what do we need to have the rates bumped up to at least break even?
Well, you'd be looking at increases of probably, without doing good math, 10 times what they currently are.
Well, the stuff that's charged directly to it is 92,000, so that'd be a 200% increase because you get 30 grand in revenue right now. The other public works staff, Parks and Rec director staff, those would just, you still would have the cost in the city budget, they'd just be doing something else. So it's not really a cost savings necessarily. We just wanted to show that there is another impact with staff being there. But so probably looking at that number of 92,000, 93,000 would be about 200% would get you that, right? Because that triple your
Well, the current
from 32 to 96.
The proposal we're making is going to bring in an additional 11,000, so that'd take that 32 up to 43, 44. So you'd have to up that few times more.
200%.
Gotcha. And then the 41,000 for the rec clerk, is that truly fully allocated to this vets hall, or do you think it's kind of absorbed by other things as well?
That's
fully
the
allocated.
that's the one that really is. She spends that time doing the reservations for it. There's a little bit of a process and taking deposits and getting this security, those types of things. So that's a true allocation. So
Okay. That's all.
Any
Thanks.
other comments, or can we, this is time for action. Discussion. Can I have a motion? This summer heat must have gotten everybody. It's kind of quiet, you know? It's only mad dogs and Englishmen, I think, get out in the sun. You guys have been out in the sun.
Okay, I'll make the, I move that we adopt Resolution 16, action order, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Solvang, increasing the fees and including an annual CPI adjustment.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Skip,
Yes.
Deuce,
Yes.
Jameson,
Yes.
Zimmerman,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes, and that passes with a 5-0. On to item 10.
Item 10, Alamo Pintado Creek Bike Pedestrian Bridge Project Update and Cooperative Agreement.
Staff report?
Alrighty. Good evening, Mayor Richardson and council members. Matt Vanderlinden, your Public Works Director and City Engineer. And as you may recall, we began the Alamo Pintado Creek Bicycle Pedestrian Bridge Project over 3 years ago with the award of engineering contract with Wallace Group out of San Luis Obispo. And as they progressed with the preliminary engineering and the design and hydrology calculations, we ran into our first sort of challenge or problem on the project, and that was the hydrology identified that with the addition of the bicycle pedestrian bridge, that would cause a backwater effect during high flows in the Alamo Pintado Creek and increase the flooding slightly, just very slightly, in the Nielsen's parking lot. And so we defined that that area that would be impacted, and we worked with the city council, directed staff to obtain what we call a flowage easement and from the property owner, and we worked with the Nielsen family and obtained the necessary flowage easement. That was in January of 2014. Our consultant continued on. They completed the environmental work on the project, and that was completed in July of 2014. But also during that time, they completed the hydraulic calculations. So the hydrology calculations were the first part, looking at how much flow is coming down the river and how the extent of area that would be impacted from flooding. And then the second part of that is the hydraulics calculations. And with that, we knew that we have to obtain an encroachment permit from Caltrans to build the project. And so we've tried to identify all the things that Caltrans would be looking at when they go to process that encroachment permit, and what things could potentially cause them to deny the encroachment permit. And those are the things we focused on addressing first before we finished the design of the whole project. So the next item then was the hydraulics, and unfortunately we had about an 8-month delay here because we went back and forth and back and forth. Our consultant would submit information. Caltrans would request the AutoCAD files to incorporate into their analysis, and well, we would submit information to them, and they would sit on it for a month or so. We'd finally call or email and say, hey, then they would say, oh, we need this other piece of information. We'd send that, and it kind of went back and forth, and Caltrans did a little bit, and then would get sidetracked, and it just, it was really difficult for us, but we really made an effort to to email them, call them, to try to push it forward. And in fact, one of the other problems that happened was the engineer that was assigned the project had a death in his family in the middle of this whole thing, and was off work for a few weeks. And so we just, you know, had all these delays. But finally in February of this year, after, like I said, pushing them as much as we could, in the process of Caltrans evaluating the impact of the abutments of the impact of the proposed bicycle pedestrian bridge, they redid their calculations evaluating the existing highway bridge, and identified that the bridge was considered what they call scour critical. And they did an analysis of the hydraulics about 10 years ago, maybe not quite that long, maybe about 8 years ago, in connection with the previous Alamo Pintado Creek proposed bridge widening project that also impacted the intersection, where they wanted the city to look at roundabout and all kinds of alternatives for that intersection. Well, with that work, they did a detailed hydraulic analysis, and when I say they, this is Caltrans Structure Hydraulics Division in Sacramento. So it's a small team of engineers that just specialize in specifically in hydraulics for Caltrans bridge and culvert structures. So back 8 years ago, the analysis, they had not identified the bridge as being scour critical. Now when they reevaluated it 8 years later, they determined it was scour critical. That's without our bridge there. So normally under that condition, they wouldn't approve any project or any construction or improvements that would potentially increase the flow velocities and thus increase the scour. So anyway, they completed their analysis. They finished a detailed analysis of the impact of our proposed bridge, and determined that yes, in fact, our proposed bicycle pedestrian bridge would increase the flow velocities a little bit and thus increase the scour. But they also determined that that was relatively minor increase in velocity and potential for scour. So they felt that they could proceed with supporting the project with the mitigation measure of adding the scour monitoring system on the bridge structure, and they would basically, the idea is they would make that a condition of our encroachment permit. And so knowing that, we could complete the design of all that ahead of time before we go in for an encroachment permit. But anyway, I wanted to just show you and explain the hydraulics a little bit, just so you have a better understanding. So here on the screen is just the site plan. It shows, this is the section right here of the proposed bicycle pedestrian bridge. I don't know if you can see my little cursor moving. Yeah, thank you. No, I think that's good. Thank you. That's good enough. So that's in the plan view. So above, looking down, the bicycle pedestrian bridge would be offset to the north about 8 to 10 feet, and the bridge would be approximately 120 feet long. And so the next slide I wanted to show you is a cross section. So this here is the elevation, or the side view, or kind of like a profile is another term for that, and that shows you the bridge there crossing the creek. But if you take a cross section through that, and if you're standing on the west side of the bridge and you're looking east, the typical section here is what you would see. And so what I've done is I've added these two red lines. This lower red line represents the approximate bottom or soffit of the existing highway bridge. And this red line represents the approximate road surface or deck of the existing highway bridge. And the blue line represents the approximate water level during the 100-year storm. So the water, relative to this cross-section, again, we're looking east. So the creek is flowing from the north down to the south under the bridge. And so what I'm trying to convey with this, these lines here is, during lower flows, the flow is just going to go right underneath the soffit of the existing highway bridge right here. But during those high flows, even though our bridge is a foot higher than the bottom of our proposed bicycle pedestrian bridge, yeah, thank you, is a foot higher than the bottom of the existing bridge. But because the existing bridge is so low and subject to this overtopping and flooding, the proposed location of the bicycle pedestrian bridge could potentially catch debris coming down in the creek and restrict the hydraulics flowing over the top of the bridge, and therefore increase velocities of water going underneath. So anyway, that's my attempt to try to convey to you sort of the scour critical and where the flows are and everything, and why Caltrans is so concerned about looking at the hydraulics of the proposed project. At any rate, also you'll notice the height of the bridge, the proposed bridge, is 9.5 feet. So in this profile here, it's just a small scale drawing, but it's 9.5 feet. So the staff report describes how, well, I guess it was in response to some questions, but if you raise this bicycle pedestrian bridge up to have a foot or two of freeboard over the 100-year floodplain, the bridge would just be way up in the sky, just, and in order to do that, you'd still have to push the abutments back and increase the length of the bridge. As the span of the bridge increases, the height of the structure has to increase to carry those heavier loads out in the middle without having any supports in the middle. So it kind of compounds the problem or the cost and the complexity of the bridge and everything. But at any rate, so Caltrans has stated that we got a final email from them on June 2nd, actually just this month, June 2nd, 2016, with their conditions of what we would have to do exactly as far as the scour monitoring system. And so there were a couple little other pieces of information I wanted to expand on. So the concern with the scour is if you have additional scour along the existing columns of the highway bridge, that will reduce the load carrying capacity of those columns or those piers, and therefore it won't be able to carry heavy truckloads. So what would happen is if whether the project proceeds or not, if heavy flows occur and scour happens, the first initial response Caltrans would make is to restrict the weight of vehicles that can cross the bridge. That would be like the first step. But the problem with our proposed bicycle pedestrian bridge is if we put this, if we proceed with the project and scour does occur, we could potentially be partially liable. They could basically tell us, look, we've done the analysis, we've already determined that you're going to increase the scour during these heavy flows, and they could also incorporate all kinds of undesirable language in the encroachment permit and things. Of course, we don't know what language they might include at this point, but anyway, so that's a potential liability to the city. And then it is true if the city were to proceed with the bicycle pedestrian bridge, and then at such time Caltrans decides to replace the bridge, the bicycle pedestrian bridge could be relocated, but there's additional costs of that. We'd have to remove the abutments. There's a cost to the abutments for the bicycle pedestrian bridge. We'd have to reconstruct new abutments somewhere else in the park or whatever. So there's additional engineering, there's cost to, do that removal, and relocation. And, so I should explain also, when Caltrans identified that the existing highway bridge is scour critical, there's also some other deficiencies that they know about right now. One is that they found reactive aggregate in the concrete. So the bridge is scour critical. It has reactive aggregate. Obviously, as you can see, it's subject to overtopping by about 2 feet during a 100-year storm, and by lesser amounts in storms of a 50-year duration or higher. So they've got that flooding and problem and all that, and also you've got all these columns down in the creek that they would like to eliminate. If this project were constructed anytime if the bridge was constructed in the last 10 or 15 years, they would have done it without any columns in the creek to disrupt flows and so forth. So the project, or the existing highway bridge has been recommended for replacement by the Caltrans Structural Hydraulics Group. They've already talked to and notified the Caltrans District 5 staff here in San Luis Obispo for our district. And so the issue is the timing of the project getting programmed in their, they have what's called the SHOP program. And so they have told us that the bridge would be considered for prioritization in the SHOP program in fiscal year 17-18, and that potentially it could be programmed to begin the engineering and environmental work in fiscal year 19-20, and typically their projects take about 4 years to complete. Our last conversation, so we got all this information from Caltrans. On June 2nd, we finally got information regarding what their requirements would be if we wanted to proceed with the bicycle pedestrian bridge, and but they also notified us that their procedures for prioritizing projects is being changed right now. It's being modified. So and the change is going to give a little more say to the District 5 staff on which projects get the highest priority. So before we brought all this information back to City Council, we wanted to talk to the District 5 staff, the highest level people that we could, to find out, hey, what's the real story? I mean, if you guys are going to be the ones prioritizing the project now, what do you think? I mean, because we heard from the Sacramento staff what they recommended, but so we finally, about a week and a half ago, got a hold of the District 5 Deputy Director of Planning and Local Assistance, and they would be the ones involved in prioritizing the project. And the prioritizing affects basically when the project will happen, when the bridge replacement will happen. And she did state that, like I mentioned, it'll be considered for prioritization, not this next fiscal year, 16-17, but the following year, 17-18. They'll discuss it and consider it for prioritization. And she mentioned that, I spoke with Eileen Lowe. She's the District 5 Deputy Director of Planning and Local Assistance. And she said that although highly probable, it's not guaranteed that the bridge would be recommended for replacement, but I can tell you it's really about a 98% certainty that it will, because of so many problems that it has and the flooding and everything that it's subject to. She said the earliest that it would be prioritized would be fiscal year 19-20 to be added to the SHOP program. So there is a potential that it could get bumped back a few years from what the Sacramento staff recommended, but Ms. Lowe also mentioned that if the city were willing to contribute, I said, well, if the city was willing to contribute a little bit of funding, would that make any difference to the prioritization. And so she said, oh, certainly, any local agency that is willing to contribute funding, that'll definitely influence the prioritization. So that's, I didn't want to commit the city to anything, but I did want to ask that question so that I could report that to you. So, in addition to all that, the SBCAG staff, with their various large Measure A projects in North Santa Barbara County, had identified significant cost savings on several large projects, and with those cost savings, they identified a list of potential projects that could receive funding or partial grant funding from those cost savings, and the city staff requested that the Alamo Pintado Creek bicycle pedestrian bridge be considered, and they like the project and have agreed to fund the project up to $600,000. So if we want to proceed with the bicycle pedestrian bridge project, the city council would need to enter into or approve and execute the cooperative funding agreement with SBCAG, and that agreement has been included with the staff report. Regarding alternatives, basically the city council could choose to approve the cooperative agreement with SBCAG and proceed with the bicycle pedestrian bridge project, or cancel the bicycle pedestrian bridge project and designate any cost share, if any, that the city would be willing to contribute towards the future Caltrans Highway 246 bridge replacement and widening. I did want to mention also, a question did come up regarding the width of the bridge and the height of the bridge. If the existing highway bridge were to be replaced, Caltrans has now a policy, the Complete Streets policy, to give a lot of preferential consideration to bicycle and pedestrian activities. So it's pretty certain that the bridge would be widened when it's replaced, and what they've indicated is to address the flooding problem, the bridge would be the profile of the bridge would be raised up a couple feet, and also the Alamo Pintado Creek would be modified and widened right there at the bridge. So with the combination of raising it a little bit and widening it a little bit to drop the water level, that's how they would plan to eliminate the flooding situation there. But I was going to mention also so one of the so one of the problem areas is going to be this parcel right here. It's in the 100-year floodplain right now, and if the highway bridge is lengthened a little bit and raised, it'd be lengthened to widen the creek there, again to address the flooding problem. So if you widen the bridge and raise it, it's really going to have a major impact on the driveway to that property. And again, this property is already within the 100-year floodplain. We have photos. The last big storm was where there was all that flooding. I think it was considered a 75 or 80-year storm, and that building was, had about 18 inches of water going right through the building.
The building
yeah, right.
to the left?
The next one.
No, not the next one, the one that's right next to the gas station. It really floods. We've had to repair that a number of times.
Yeah, right there, you mean?
Yeah,
The bank across the street floods.
Yeah. So there's a variety of ways if the city, did want to focus more on the bridge replacement and widening project. There's a lot of opportunity for the city to be involved to help Caltrans basically, and then and thus help raise the priority level of the project. But that's just one area that.
Well, we could always hope the bridge collapses like the one over by Mail Road did years ago. No, people didn't think that bridge would collapse either, and they took a heavy truck, went across it, and it folded like a house of cards.
So, of course, the city council can provide staff with any other direction you deem appropriate. And regarding the fiscal impacts, we currently have a contract in place with Wallace Group to complete all the engineering work except for approximately $10,000 that would need to be added to do the design work for the scour monitoring system. And let me see here. So if this, right now in the budget, we haven't included anything. Well, I think we've included $10,000 in there, kind of as a placeholder. So based on your direction, we would have to, adjust the budget accordingly. And so it's estimated that if we do proceed with the bicycle pedestrian bridge, at the completion of the design, we would have about $65,000 in Indian gaming funds to put towards the construction. If we stop right now, we'll have about $163,000 remaining in Indian gaming funds that could be put towards the future bridge highway bridge widening and replacement. We felt that was a consistent use because that was the purpose of it originally, to widen the bridge. So it seems consistent in that respect. But anyway, so that concludes my staff report, and I'm here for any questions you have.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, is this just the bridge, or does it sneak up into the intersection also?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. So we can't really answer that question with 100% certainty, but what we do know is when we looked at widening the bridge before, Caltrans said, oh, no, you can't widen the bridge unless you look at the intersection and improve the whole intersection. So so that was the requirement by Caltrans on the project when the older project of looking at the bridge widening. So we do anticipate that with the complete streets concept, with the widening of the bridge, with adding the bike lanes there, it's pretty likely that it's going to also kind of incorporate in some kind of improvements at the intersection. Like I said, we don't really know for sure, but most likely, at least between the bridge and the intersection, would be improved also with the widening of the bridge. You'd have to do something to create the transitions to the wider bridge and back down. So
It seems to me that this, again, should be one project. My feeling on it, just in that.
I would bet it would be. I would just throw the roundabout back in there because Caltrans is a big proponent of that, and if they become the lead on this project.
We know that, but we need the intersection along with the bridge, but we do not need a roundabout.
Oh, come on, where's your sporting blood? I'm a proponent of a roundabout,
sure it'll be
but
a
not at that
consideration.
intersection.
They can talk to us about it, which they will. But
yeah, well, as far as the roundabout goes, we had mentioned to the council a while back when Caltrans was looking at the intersection with Skip Mesa Road and Mission Drive, Highway 246 there. So they have a new process. They call it the ICE process, or the Intersection Control Evaluation. So they'd have to go through that, and the city council here of Solvang could weigh in on that, and doesn't necessarily mean it'll change their mind, but you can definitely, there's definitely multiple points where the city council could make its wishes known and communicate with Caltrans along the way. So
How is the, whatever they call it, New Frontiers, are they still going to have an entrance off of 246?
Caltrans is still, let's see, dragging their feet on that. And
Dragging their feet.
the most recent is the roundabout concept they want evaluated, which we forwarded to them because this is their planning department that we had done. We've actually done a study on 2 different roundabouts at that intersection. So they have that information. It's not really pertinent to that driveway necessarily. But so they've not conceded on that yet. And the developers actually asked us to try to step in. And if you recall, oh gosh, it's probably been 3-4 months ago, the council had an item on the agenda to send a letter supporting the driveway, and I think the developer's probably at that point that he would like to bring that back and have the council at least get that in writing to Caltrans that we support the driveway.
Yeah, I did want to just add, initially, when the developer submitted his plans and concept drawings and so forth to Caltrans, there were 2 individuals in their planning division that were involved reviewing it and made comments about additional evaluation they wanted done. The most recent set of comments that have come from Caltrans, well, the developer, following those comments, the developer hired another traffic engineer to assist them to do an ICE study, this intersection control evaluation, and try to work with Caltrans to get that driveway approved. And the most recent comments back from Caltrans basically are in essence throwing additional requirements and hurdles for the developer. And that's when the developer recently contacted us to say, hey, can the city help? But yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that Caltrans really doesn't like the idea of the driveway. So I'm just...
Any other bridge questions? I have a question. You said that if Caltrans decides to replace the bridge, then they're responsible for any other conditions to make it work, i.e., the intersection improvement too. Is that right? And would they include the bicycle portion of the bridge also? Would that be on their dime?
Yes. So it's their right of way, it's their bridge, and it's their policy, the Complete Streets policy, that dictates to their staff that now they need to give really significant consideration to bicycle and pedestrian activities, because they're trying to promote these alternative modes of transportation and also healthier lifestyle for the residents. And so to follow their own policy, they're going to have to give significant consideration to that. So
now the Measure A funds that are programmed for that bridge, if we don't use them to construct this particular plan, will that money still, can we still hold that money for future bridge?
Yeah, the answer is no. So
well, you'd have to go back to SBCAG and get them to modify.
Well,
you remember the expenditure plan was modified to add this
Right.
project. So unless you spend it on this project, you wouldn't have the ability.
I'll guarantee you
without their
that
permission.
if you turn it back, you will not get that $600 back, period.
Right.
Because
that's
the
what
oversight committee won't allow that.
Right. The Citizens Oversight Committee
Right.
didn't like the idea that the cost savings was being used for more
Exactly.
projects. They wanted the cost savings to go into like a separate reserve fund, so that if future large projects go over budget, they'd have some money there to sort of draw on to help out those other future projects. So the SBCAG staff had done a lot of work associated with projects that they could fund with these cost savings. And so my understanding is that the Citizens Oversight Committee said, okay, well, these projects will okay, but...
Well, actually, the board said these projects will be okay. This will be the line.
Okay.
And then the policy's been written that there will be no other cost-saving expenditures to any other projects off the plan. So if we don't use the money, we lose it forever. That's my prediction. If we can set it aside conditionally that it will be used at some time in the future for a bike pedestrian bridge, i.e. 5 or 10 or 15 years from now, would that money still be set aside for us?
Well, we'd have to ask SBCAG, but the staff, the SBCAG staff have indicated if we don't proceed with the project now, it's not likely that the funds would be available for any other project. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we have time for public comment. I have no speaker slips. Does anyone wish to make a comment on this particular agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for action. What is your desires? We have 3 options.
Last time, we talked about the bridge, and I forget when it was a while ago, and Matt, you brought up the scour issue. I think I'd asked what kind of responsibility would we have in this if we went ahead and built the bridge. Now, I think it's very clear what you said tonight is that we could be assuming a lot of responsibility if something happens to the bridge. And we proceed with the pedestrian bridge, and I really don't want to take that liability, especially if within a few years we can get Caltrans to do it all and put a bicycle and pedestrian and everything else in there. I think we just back off of it for a while. We back off of our part and don't go all of that trouble. Don't incur that liability of the possibility of the significant scour problem, losing a bridge, or certainly losing capacity on it.
I agree. Back off and bank on Caltrans doing the full reconstruction.
Question for Matt. What is the considered a normal lifespan for a bridge like that?
A bridge like the bicycle pedestrian bridge, or
Or
a bridge like
the one, the existing Caltrans bridge over Alamo Pintado?
Yeah, typically they shoot for a 50-year design life, and the bridge can last quite a bit longer than that. I'm sure you've seen historic bridges that are 80 years old like that, but they typically shoot for a 50-year design life.
Because that bridge is currently, I want to say it's probably pushing 60 years. It was built in the early 50s, probably 53 or 54. Because I remember when they widened the road, they took half of my grandparents' front yard because they relocated the road to have a sweeping corner on that bridge. It used to be a real sharp turn onto Old Mission Drive, and I mean a sharp. It wasn't a sweeping turn. It was like a 90-degree turn, and then they straightened it and they put the fill in going down 246 on that one. And that's when they called it 150, and then it was 154. That's 246. They keep changing the number on it, but it is a like I said, put in about 1953, 1954. And it was before they discovered they had such things as, expensive, reactive aggregate.
I agree with the idea of us trying to eliminate any liability. However, I'd like to suggest before we make a decision on what we're going to do, that we get with SBCAG to see if there's some way that we can hold that money for future use on a bike pedestrian bridge. If there could be a point of contact with SBCAG to bring it back to the full board for action, to grant a waiver that we don't use it now, but we use it in the future to help program according to Caltrans we can program the overall bridge construction earlier, that 600,000 would work toward that goal, which would be a benefit for the county. And so I would like to see if the staff could approach SBCAG staff to put that as an agenda item before we take action on whether or not we want to lose that $600,000.
Yeah, what I think I heard is let's put it on pause. So while we have it on pause, we can definitely have that conversation with SBCAG to see if that money would be
Exactly, if there's some
available
way we
to
can
move
use
to
use those dollars before we make a final decision.
So
No, I think, yeah, if we can secure it somehow or another, let's go for that. Let's just see where it falls. But
Yeah, I think-
I still hate to build a bridge, irregardless of whether we get the 600 or not, and then
Have it torn down.
have it torn down and Caltrans.
Can I remind you of a boxing axiom? Don't lead with your eyes. Don't let them know that you don't want to build the bridge. Because of their liability problem. We want to know if we can keep the $600,000.
And I think SBCAG of all agencies understands that a local contribution to a state project it helps it fund much easier.
Right.
And so they would understand that $600,000 towards the overall project would be a better project overall.
Exactly. So then with that, can we put this issue on continue?
Yeah.
Can I just clarify?
Sure.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, the staff has already told us what they thought, so we're gonna be making a formal request to the
Yes.
staff to take it to their full board.
That's correct.
To see if, okay, just clarify.
Okay, very good. And so that we will continue this item at some date in the future. Thank you. Next are council member reports. Do anybody else besides me have council? Go right ahead, Joni.
I'm not really a so-called member of, what do we call this? The San Is, special district for sewer. And they are in the process of trying to annex some properties that are already in their sphere of influence into, to get rid of some of the septic systems. There are about 384 parcels of land that would be affected by this annexation. So I went to the meeting just because I was curious, because eventually it's all going to come downhill to us. And supposedly we have the capacity, supposedly, depending on what the Community Services District is going to be allowed to be built on the various parcels that are coming in. I suppose if every parcel that's coming in is also going to have a second residential unit, that we may not have enough capacity to service all of that. And most of these parcels probably are of a size that would allow a second residential unit. So I thought I would just go and listen. Well, was it an eye-opener? LAFCO is the lead in this, in that they have sent out the ballots. They have to vote. Everybody has to vote as to whether or not they are interested in becoming a part of the Community Services District. They're in the sphere, but they aren't a part of the district. So this is what's happened, to the best of my understanding. Most of the people threw their ballots away because they thought it was junk mail. So they're all upset about that. So some people have taken it upon themselves to print ballots. Not LAFCO, just individuals are printing ballots. Supposedly, the first group of ballots not only went to property owners, but they went to renters, they went to occupants, and they went to registered voters. So unlike what we have done, where we sent it to the owner of the property, and that's it, there are more than 1,200 ballots swimming around out there regarding these 384 parcels. All of these ballots have to be turned in by the 30th, which is Thursday, to LAFCO, either thumbs up or thumbs down. Well, everybody's concerned now that there are so many of these forged ballots swimming around out there that the vote is not going to be valid. In going to the meeting, I thought it was a very hostile group of people in the audience. They did not like how they were being treated. They felt that they were being pushed into doing something. They didn't understand that they did not have to sign up to be a part of the community services district. They could continue to use their septic system. They were told it was a $25,000 fee. It would go on their taxes and be paid over time. But then somebody said, but that doesn't get it to our house, does it? And of course the answer is no, it doesn't get it to the house. It only gets it to the tie-in at the street. So there's a lot of misinformation that's going on out there about this whole process. The people are very anxious about it, and I just stay tuned. If you go on and look at, what is it, Ray's paper called, the Solvang Star? No, the San Ynez Valley Star. She has written some really good articles. It's very enlightening. She was there, and she understands what's happening. But if you see some of those ballots around, don't turn them in. That's all I have to say. It was just very, it was interesting.
There's a county ordinance or something called LAMP, Local Area Municipal Plan or something to that effect, that requires, if a septic system should fail, requires an immediate replacement some way, or which is going to cost in the neighborhood of $40,000. The point of that is that some folks say it's going to cost $40,000 to tie into the sewer system. And if they're forced to tie into the sewer system after they spent the $40,000 to upgrade their septic tanks, then they're $80,000 into this thing. So that's where the confusion and where the upset feelings are on these things.
Well, and also you have to have a certain size parcel in order to put this upgrade in, and most of the parcels are not big enough for that upgrade.
And then on top of that, there's a fear that the community services district will take their water too, become part of the community services district. Some of those private companies in that area, that's something in the back of some of those folks' mind. Anyway, we're on to other future fun things. Sure.
Fred Koval, Solvang. Yeah, because of this upheaval and the hostility rightfully expressed by the owners, the second time at last ID1's meeting, they reminded everybody that they have latent powers and they can step in and override everything that's going on and take control of that whole situation, that whole issue. They can step in and do the job and completely bypass, get rid of the community services district hostile approach. And I don't know if how much they're going to follow through on this.
They have to deal with LAFCO and doing something like that.
Oh no, they're outside. They trump LAFCO, and they reminded everybody about that.
No, I don't think LAFCO agrees with that, but that's okay. On to SBCAG. You received the SBCAG summary. Does anybody have any questions on that summary? No questions. Okay. We'll go on to APCD. The APCD was just going over, we had a hearing on the budget, and that's about the extent of it. There was a discussion by the director made a report on things going on, and the consent agenda went over some of the rules and some of the penalties that had occurred in the past 2 months, and that's just about the extent of that. That meeting lasted about 10 minutes. So that was that one, and that's the end. That's the only meetings I attended, and so that's the example. That's all I have. Does anybody have anything else? Then, if there's no other discussion, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for sitting through this thing, you know.
Can't watch it on TV.
And I offered to cancel that, you know, earlier.
Our names.
What are you doing?
I gave him those notes.
Oh, he doesn't care.